Hi everyone, my name is Sundai. I run a consultancy firm called McKinsey Horizons, and what I do is I go to large companies and I help them set up what I call their innovation ecosystem. And you can follow me at Sundai50.
My biggest client at the moment, the one that I'm working with most closely, is Pearson, the FTSE 100 global education company that used to own The Economist and the Financial Times, etc. And it's pretty obvious that the education space is being disrupted, right? Digital is forcing people to reimagine what education would look like if the first form of printing press was the iPad, right? If the iPad was the first tool that was ever used for education, what would education look like? And so these companies are reimagining that, and that's obviously a challenge for a large company like Pearson that uses more traditional means, or has been historically using more traditional means to actually do its work. And so this actually kind of speaks to the whole notion that, you know, when you do your traditional MBA, people are usually told that the role of management is to find a competitive advantage and then protect that competitive advantage with your life, right? So Rita McGrath proposes this notion that there's no longer such a thing as competitive advantages. The pace of change is so fast that you can't ever protect your advantage. I mean, people are asking strange questions like, where have all the iPhone Qs gone? Right? But it's actually, that's not that strange. Like, that's what happens, you know, things go big and then they go down really, really, really quickly. And so when you work at a large company, the next thing you do is you find some startup guy and they come to your company and they go, you have to do lean. You have to act like a startup. Like, startup is the thing. Like, if you're not, these guys are going to kill you, right? But for a large company, acting like a startup is a bit like dad at the disco. Right? It's a bit like, you know, trying to dance when you're basically embarrassing your children. And so what we've discovered in doing this work is that established companies have to recognize what they are. And Steve Blank really makes a nice distinction between searching for a sustainable business model and executing on a known business model. And he made this distinction to help startups identify where they are in their life. So stop trying to imitate large companies, try and execute. Don't try and execute on your business plan, but rather try and search and see if you can find a sustainable business model. And that distinction is actually really powerful for startups. For large companies, they have to do both things because they have to execute on their current business model while simultaneously searching for a more sustainable business model. And this is the perennial question that large companies have always faced. Even in the example we just heard now, they had to sustain their current business and then try and grow revenue by doing searching in another market. So this is what large companies actually have to do. Now, there's a whole bunch of things that are happening that are innovation, what we call innovation theater. So there's the whole thing about you have to set up an innovation lab. You can't do innovation in a large company. You have to set up an innovation lab. Large companies have too many MBAs. MBAs get in the way. They want business plans, so you need to set up an innovation lab. What happens in the innovation lab? Well, you need people with iMacs. You need Post-it notes. You need canvases. You need a beanbag to see this is ideation. So you can't rush inspiration. All of these things are happening, and then when you try and measure the outputs that are coming from these innovation labs, you actually start to find out that they're not having the impact on revenue that they're supposed to have. You go to large companies, and the head of the innovation lab is like, I'm letting 1,000 flowers bloom, right? And that's just like whatever. That's not even good for a garden. So it's definitely not good for a large company. And also the notion that you can set an innovation lab and do innovation away from the main business is kind of a myth, because at some point, whatever is happening at the innovation lab is going to need someone from the main business to make a decision about it. They're either going to have to make a decision to carry on funding you, make a decision to scale your idea, give you more money, support it, or close it. So if you think you've gone into hiding when you're in an innovation lab, you actually really haven't. At some point, somebody's going to ask you a question about what you're doing there. And so it's important that whatever methodology you choose is actually integrated into the rest of the company as part of the ecosystem, the strategic drive that the company is actually working on. Another myth that's out there as well with the let the 1,000 flowers bloom thing is that creativity is the same as innovation. right? Creativity is not innovation. Coming up with a cool new idea, the R&D is not innovation. What actually really has to happen is the process that Mark described, which is the innovation is a combination of smart new ideas with sustainable business models. So if you're an innovation lab and all you do is ideation and just come up with really cool stuff and make prototypes and all this stuff, but you're not actually testing the model in the market, you're not an innovation lab. You're maybe the guys that come up with cool ideas lab. But that's about the end of it, right? So that's actually really important. And when we say a sustainable business model, what we mean is something that creates value for your customers, for your ecosystem, but also the capacity to deliver that value in a way that's sustainably profitable. So now we know the job description for an innovator is a person who comes up with great, cool new stuff, but is also able to make money with that cool new stuff, right? That's very, very important. And this is what we call the sweet spot for innovation. Happy customers, loads of money, et cetera, right? So that's what we're supposed to be doing. Now, in order to do this within a large company, we have developed a model that we call the innovation ecosystem, and it is captured in these 5 principles, which I'm going to sort of quickly go through one by one. And I'm going to use Pearson as the case study of how we've been actually doing this work. So the first thing you need is what I call the innovation thesis. It's a corny phrase for strategy. And I took this from venture capital firms. Most venture capital firms have what they call an investment thesis. You don't just invest in anybody that comes pitching you an idea. And the formulation of innovation thesis stops the let 1,000 flowers bloom notion of innovation. Just come up with any idea. And then after you've come up with the idea becomes an orphan because there's nobody in the company who thinks it's strategically aligned to their goals, right? And so the company should spend time thinking about where it wants to go with innovation, where are they facing non-consumption, which markets do they want to go to, which trends are they facing that they might want to reach with innovation, and then from there formulate a thought about what kind of things they're going to invest in and what kind of things they're not going to invest in to try and maximize this. And so, for example, this is Union Square Ventures, that's Fred Wilson, that's his investment thesis for their venture capital firm. So we invest in large networks of engaged users, differentiated by user experience, and defensible through network effects. If the idea is not this, they're not going to put money in it. So they invest in Etsy and Pinterest and those kind of ideas. And so a large company has to do something like this. And Pearson did this a few years ago. They had to rethink where they thought the world was going, and they could see global education as a growing trend, especially as the emerging economies were growing and the middle classes were growing there. They were spending more money on education. And so Pearson decided to do a pivot. They used to own a whole bunch of stuff that they sort of divested from. Last year, they sold the Financial Times. And now the focus is on global education. And so all the innovation work that will be happening in that company would be focused on tackling that problem. Not just letting 1,000, I think car washes would be good, right? That's not the way to actually do the work. But also an innovation thesis is an evolving thing. So what you're really looking for is emergent strategy. So the innovation thesis is like a strategic guide, and then learnings from the market kind of tell you whether or not your thesis is correct, and then you evolve your thesis as you go. And you will see later that that's actually the role of the ecosystem. Another thing large companies need to ensure they have as an expression of their thesis is what we call the innovation portfolio, and that's the second principle. And so if you do an analysis of most large companies, they'll have core products that will be like 90, 95, 99% of their revenue. They don't have anything in their pipeline that they're worried about. They don't have anything in their own pipeline that they have to worry about taking away market share from their own products, right? They're more worried about other people taking away market share. And so what you really need is what we call a balanced portfolio that covers core, adjacent, and transformational innovation, the whole notion of where to play, how to win, right? And in a really great Harvard Business Review article by Nagji and Tuff, they talk about like a balanced portfolio is when you invest 70% of your resources in the core, 20% in the adjacent, and 10% in the transformational. Another way to conceptualize this is, of course, the McKinsey Horizons. People are quite familiar with these. And what I found was really cool about this was when Facebook last year did a presentation, Mark Zuckerberg presented the 3 horizons. So this is the next 3 years, the next 5 years, and then the next 10 years. And you can see the ecosystem there, developing. And a lot of companies tend to just have a majority of their products here. And if they do innovation, it's like, let's add one more feature and then move to this market. And that's like a heart-wrenching decision, right? And that's not really how to maintain the balance of your portfolio. Now, here's a very important principle to absorb. The way you manage your core is not the same way that you manage your innovation, right? Because a lot of large companies will say, oh, great, you've come up with your 1,000 flowers. Now, we're going to, and then let's vote. Let's have a, you know the idea competitions, right? Let's have a vote. And then people go online and they vote for something. And then the winning idea comes up like, yes, this guy won. And then they say, right, you've won the innovation contest. Now go away and write me a 25-page business plan before I give you any money. Right? And the problem with business plans is that business plans are an imagination of a future that doesn't exist. It's a form of fiction. And the rituals, especially for new ideas, and the rituals of the meeting that happens after you've submitted your business plan is a way of institutionalizing this fiction as if it's reality. Oh yes, your 5-year projections make sense. Oh yes. I mean, when I did my MBA and I was in the entrepreneurship course, we made up the projections. And when we entered them and they didn't look impressive, we increased the numbers. 10 million, yes. And in year 5, we're going to make 500 million, right? And then the decision-making process for the management is to decide whether or not they want to believe this person. So the best storytellers with the best presentation decks win, always. And obviously the best politicians with networks within the company. And what we're talking about here is that every company should have a notion of testing and validating ideas, an innovation framework where once you decide the things that you're working on, rather than ask people to make you a plan, you ask them to bring you evidence. All right, and so this is the typical waterfall. You come up with an idea, write a business plan, and then you launch, and then things don't work out. Now, Ash Maurya's running lean model is pretty good. He talks about first finding problem-solution fit, and then finding product-market fit, and then scaling, right? So that's a pretty good distinction. It's based on that searching and executing, which is, the fundamental principle really is you only execute after you've validated the business model. You only go to scale after you know what's going to work at scale. You don't do it before. And so at Pearson, we kind of took all those things and put them together in what we're calling the lean product life cycle. So you can see that dotted line up there. That's the distinction between searching and executing. So there's a searching half of the life cycle and an execution half of the life cycle. And products go through ideation, exploring customer needs, validating the solution and the business model. And then after that, they then get investments to grow, and then the rest of the portfolio is sustained, and also making decisions to retire. And one of the first things we did when we first started was we looked at the entire portfolio of Pearson and we mapped it to the life cycle. Every single product was mapped to the life cycle. We developed a questionnaire that asked people, you know, using the key criteria for each one of these stages, whether or not the product was actually there, and then it got classified. Now, classifying products along the innovation life cycle allows you to make decisions about what to do next. So if people haven't validated a customer need, they shouldn't be going to scale. If people haven't validated that customers will pay for the solution, they shouldn't be launching a $1 million campaign to market this. People shouldn't be hiring a sales force to sell something that they don't know who wants it. But all these are practices that happen in large organizations quite a bit. And so you can see here the decision between searching and execution. The searching part goes really fast. It's very minimal investment. And then after you cross we call it crossing the threshold there, you're now into the scale part of the life cycle. And so yeah, so this is the journey. You can see the ideas coming, and you can always go back and iterate. You can always go back and iterate, and you can always go back and iterate. And only when you've validated your business model do you actually start going to scale. Okay, so how many people have gone to a business model design session or an experiment session or a lean innovation session and then gone back to work and told your boss you're going to do an experiment, and the boss was like, what? Just do the plan, right? One of the things we learned pretty early on was that if you don't have an innovation management process to support the life cycle, because a lot of people think that the best way to manage innovation is to train people how to do innovation within the company. But one of the things that we've learned is that the company's capabilities, the organizational capabilities, how a company makes decisions to invest money, what type of ideas they invest in, what kind of people get money, what is the culture for developing products, that always trumps any person's ability to run an experiment. right? And so it's important that supporting this innovation framework is actually innovation accounting. And so with innovation accounting, we've sort of, in our work, developed like 3 types of accounting that you can sort of think about. So the first piece is what we call innovation practice. This is innovation accounting of the single experiment. If we put up a landing page, will we get signups? And that's your basic build, measure, learn loop. That's right at the most granular level of innovation accounting. It's just an innovation project tracking its own success, right? And then at the next level of innovation accounting is management trying to make decisions about whether or not to keep on funding particular projects. And we call that governance in innovation accounting. So they're using the life cycle. And in governance innovation accounting, it's Dave McClure's Moneyball for startups. You invest a little bit, you track progress, then you double down, or you exit. Right? Those are very, very sort of basic principles there. And then obviously there's the bigger global innovation accounting, which is the innovation work we're doing, aligning with our innovation thesis? Are we hitting the things that we thought we were going to hit? You have the innovation thesis, then you make investment decisions about where to play, then you review that over time. The cool thing about this thing that we stumbled upon is that it's a series of interlinked build, measure, learn loops at every layer of the organization. It's like this interlocked engine of sort of iterative decision making from the strategic level to the governance level, all the way to the little project making decisions right at the bottom. And so you can see here Dave McClure's a little bit. Once you get to problem solution fit, you double down, then you get to validation, then you double down, and you keep increasing investments in that way. And at Pearson, we set up a system called the product councils, and the product councils make investment decisions on ideas. It's a small group of people working very closely with product teams that are sort of like a small portfolio of product teams. And we have rules around how much you can spend at any stage of the life cycle. So you can't ever spend more than 50 grand if you're just exploring customer needs. You can't ever spend more than 250 grand if you're just exploring solutions. And then after that, you get incremental investment going forward. And you can see there the key criteria. So, have you identified something that aligns with our strategy? Yes, okay, here's 50 grand. Have you validated customer needs? Okay, here's 250 grand. Can you demonstrate product market fit? Okay, here's the next investments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And we've set up all the tools and platforms and decision-making frameworks where all this stuff is captured, and then it sort of surfaces to the organization as a portfolio. And you can see the ideas navigating. Now, this is not let a thousand flowers bloom, right? It's more those ideas actually have to be aligned with the thesis before they even start to be spoken about. And then finally, at the end of the ecosystem, at the edge of the ecosystem, is the practice piece. This is where you're doing your business model canvases and running experiments, et cetera, et cetera. And so at Pearson, we have what we call the Product Lifecycle Coach Program, where we train specific individuals, either middle management or people who are product managers, on how to do innovation practice within the company. And they're sort of spread out within the company, and you get a certification badge. You go for a 2-day workshop, and then you spend 6 weeks doing actual practical stuff with the teams, sharing that progress with us, and then we certify you as a life cycle coach, and then those coaches are embedded with the product teams. Because the rule is the thing that we did, which was really interesting, is we got agreement from the CFO that people will not get investment unless they use the life cycle. So now teams are like, okay, I need to do this, but in order to do that, I have to do this. How do I do that? Well, you have a product life cycle coach, right? And in addition to that, we wrote a playbook called the Product Lifecycle Playbook, which is a step-by-step guide, again, about how to implement the lifecycle, how to run experiments, how to talk to customers, how to build minimum viable products, how to scale, et cetera, et cetera. It's a 100-page playbook, sort of based on the lifecycle stages, and that's out for innovation practice. And then we have a platform. This is the product lifecycle platform, where again people share best practice, and we create communities, and we have meetups, and et cetera, because again, at the end of the day, it's still the people that have to be engaged in order to produce the stuff that's interesting. We're just trying to set up an ecosystem in which they can actually thrive. And so in the end, you see that it's an integrated framework, right? Everything comes together, and it's joined together by the build, measure, learn loops that I was telling you about, right? So it becomes almost like and here's the cool thing that I also discovered the other day, is that the ecosystem itself is a build, measure, learn loop. So innovation strategy is tested by innovation practice, which is then reviewed by innovation management. And it just keeps going like that. So that in the end, what you have is this engine that's of interconnected pieces that work together as an innovation ecosystem. And so this is Pearson's innovation ecosystem. We'll have the playbook, we'll have the templates for governance, we'll have the product councils, we'll have communities, we'll have strategy. All of these things feed together as an expression of this ecosystem, right? And so I'm also writing a book, but I don't have it physically yet. So this is the corporate startup. We did a crowdfunding campaign, and we've released it to the 300 people that backed us during the crowdfunding, and we've just signed a deal with a publisher, and that will be coming out soon. It's a Dutch publishing company, VAC MediaNet, that's working with us. And also, the product lifecycle playbook is going to be a book. And we're going to release that publicly, the Pearson Product Lifecycle Playbook. Pearson's a publishing company, so that's easier. We signed the deal with Pearson, and we're going to put out the book. And thank you.